Hi, my name is Mary Gonzalez. I am a certified recovery specialist and certified family recovery specialist. This is my 18th time trying to record this video. And it's basically just because I'm so nervous. I have shared in classrooms, in church basements, in conference centers, convention centers, and meetings, and in front of professionals, but I guess the amount of pressure I'm putting on myself from trying to convey what Stella's Casa really is, and what I really wish it to be, what I pray for it to be. Not only a nonprofit organization that helps, substance abuse dependents, addicts, alcoholics, but also their family members. I truly believe that everybody deserves a second chance, and that nobody should have to start healing or recovering alone. I know I didn't. A little bit about me: I'm originally from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I am an Eagles fan. um, I had a single mother raising me and my brother, and her name was Stella. I grew up in an environment where substance abuse was common, was normal. My family members did it, my mother did it, those in the neighborhood did it, everybody just did it. I grew up in the 1980s. I'm an 80s baby. And, crack epidemic became a thing in inner cities. You know, uh, at first, I only seen the beautiful side of addiction and alcoholism. My grandmother had a speakeasy, and so there was always people over and parties and drinking and celebrations, and every day was somebody's birthday or holiday. And I remember seeing joy and happiness, and I had no idea what addiction was really going to do to my life. In 1987, my mom was diagnosed with HIV, and my life forever changed. See, in my family, we didn't talk about stuff. We didn't talk about feelings or struggles, challenges, or secrets. We used something, whether it was drugs, alcohol, relationships, shopping. We just used anything, basically, we could in order to avoid reality or emotions. But my mom experienced a lot of consequences as a result of her addiction. Not only did she contract HIV as a result of substance abuse and poor life choices, but she was in and out of jails, in and out of institutions, psych wards. I remember visiting my mother behind bars. I remember getting taken away and put in foster care and bounced from relative to relative most of my childhood. I remember being abused and neglected, not necessarily by her, but by people she associated with, people that she said she loved. Not some of the world's best people. And that continued until the age of 12, when I was finally reunited with my mother. When I was reunited, I really wanted to think that things were going to be different. That my mother was going to get clean and stay clean, and everything was just going to be great. But instead, what happened is I turned to drugs. She had a long-term relationship and he happened to sell drugs. So I started using at the age of 12. Because we didn't talk about stuff, we just avoided stuff. And I learned a long time ago that that helped. And that kind of thinking continued. And I tried to convince myself that I was going to be this exceptional addict, that I wasn't going to end up in jail. I wasn't going to end up, using harder drugs or, going to institutions or rehab, or I wasn't going to lose my kids and I wasn't going to lose myself, that I was going to be a functioning addict. I convinced myself of that. Until by the age of 21, all I had was a drug. I had a son who I had abandoned because my disease didn't care that I was a mother. It didn't care that I wanted to be different. It didn't care that I was loved. It didn't care. I had a disease that stripped me of every moral fiber. I became a shell of a human being, and the only thing I cared about was that next one. I ended up homeless, sleeping in my car, and I couldn't use enough drugs in order to escape reality anymore. The drugs had stopped working. And it was my mother. The same woman I judged, the same woman I resented, the same woman I blamed for my addiction was the woman that called to get me help. She drove me for my drug and alcohol assessment at the age of 21, 2 weeks shy of my 22nd birthday. And she helped save my life. Now, I'm typically a crier, and I'm going to try not to cry during this video. But when I talk about my mother, when I talk about Stella, it's hard not to, because she was one of the most amazing women I've ever met in my entire life. I never understood what my mother went through until I went through it myself. And she was the last person I thought that would try to save me. But despite my resentment and anger and whatever towards my mother, even throughout my entire childhood or young adult life, I idolized her. I worshipped the ground she walked on, and I thought she was the most incredible person. I always seen more in her than she's seen in herself. I just didn't understand why my love wasn't enough to keep my mom from using. I didn't understand why my love and my brother weren't enough to keep her from chasing love, regardless of who was dishing it out. I didn't understand why my mom hung out with the people she did. Why she did the things she did. I didn't understand until I started doing them. I treated people horribly, and I was like the scum on the bottom of my shoe. But I followed the recommendations of this treatment center. And I went to treatment, and I was introduced to a 12-step program that helped save my life. My mom became my biggest cheerleader in my recovery process. She watched her 9th grade dropout daughter go on and graduate college, get married, have a bunch of kids. I'm a mother of 4 today. And they're incredible blessings. I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for her or them. And not to get too spiritual, but without God, none of this would be possible. I wouldn't have been able to survive my mother's active addiction, abuse, neglect, and craziness that happens with children of addicts. I wouldn't be able to survive my own addiction, and I wouldn't have gotten clean. But anyway, my mother got to see a lot before she passed away. And I changed because of a fellowship of people, because of spiritual growth, maturity, trying to do something different. Somebody believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Somebody loving me when I was incapable of loving myself. And it wasn't just one person. It was really like a village of people. Countless people that I can't even... It would take me a whole other video to mention everybody. But my mother, my brother, my kids, NA, AA, God, people I worked with, people I met, strangers on the street. So many people helped me in this process of recovery. I've been in recovery since 2005. October 3rd, 2005 was my clean date. But I relapsed. I'm one of those addicts who needed to experience a relapse. To become more serious, more humble. I wish I could say that I got it on my first try. I managed to stay clean for 13 and a half years. In those 13 and a half years, I not only got to see myself grow and other people grow, but my mother changed completely. She became the woman I always knew that she was capable of being. She started going to church and started a food bank and a clothing closet at her church. She became one of the most non-judgmental, humble, understanding, compassionate human beings. Even in my mistakes, even in my horrible decisions in life, she always supported me. She always loved me. My mother was a true example of what happens when somebody's given a second chance at life. She became undetectable after having full-blown AIDS. And she turned her pain into purpose. She was my hero. She was my earth angel. I lost her January 4th of 2018, and I thought I was cured. I thought I didn't need people anymore. I didn't need the fellowship, and I didn't need God. That I could do it on my own. But when I lost her, I lost me. Because she became my recovery. My kids became my recovery, and I used because I wanted to avoid reality again. I didn't want to deal with feelings and emotions. I didn't want to deal with the loss of my mother. So I stayed out there for a little while, a good while. My kids had to experience my active addiction for the first time in their lives. I got to experience some of that guilt and shame that my mom harbored. And it humbled me. Not just as a person, not as a recovering addict, but it humbled me as a mother. And it made me respect my disease a lot more. So I got clean again because the state of Pennsylvania suggested, excuse me, that I get myself together yet again. And I didn't want to, substance abuse disorder usually doesn't just go away in a day. So, but I did. You know, February 8th, I'm getting old, of 2021 is my clean date. I have a little over 5 years right now. And my recovery coming back hasn't been easy. Because this time I didn't lose the house or the car or the stuff. I didn't lose my kids. But I lost me. And the same thing happened again. I was given a second chance at recovery. I was given a second chance at life. And it was God. Now, like I said, if you're not a believer, you don't have to be. This is just my experience. But anyway, it was the fellowship again of NA. It was my sponsor, and it was my counselor, it was my CRS, it was my family, it was my friends, it was my kids. It was an army of people. No, in Williamsport, we don't have like a recovery center or a place to go hang out at, like a clubhouse or anything like that. We don't have that. We have meetings, smart recovery, yoga recovery, like all this, like recovery stuff, but we didn't really have a place to hang out. And when I became a certified recovery specialist, because my CRS suggested, my friend, suggested that I become a CRS, I was a little apprehensive, but I knew how much helping people had helped me in the past. You know, I had been a tech and a counselor and worked in drug and alcohol since 2006, and I had experience in the field, and recovery's been my life. Even with the, relapse. Maybe I needed that experience too to help others. I've learned in my life that nothing happens by coincidence, that everything happens for a purpose. It's either a lesson or a blessing. So, I took everything that my mother gave me. The courage, the bravery, the love, being non-judgmental and being humble, being charitable. Like every week, this woman would go to church and give out food and clothes to people in need. Even though we're the ones at one point that were standing in soup line kitchens and, and food pantries and on welfare, paper food stamps, That's the era we came from. But my mom, who didn't really have anything, who lived off a fixed income, was probably one of the most generous people I've ever met. So when I started as a CRS, I worked for an outpatient facility, and I started a food bank there and a clothing closet, and it just felt like I wanted to do more. Like there was more that I could do for my community, for the people in my area, for those seeking help and assistance. I just wanted to do more. This is a girl that grew up in 13th and Dairy in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in the projects, that never thought she was going to amount to anything. I thought I was destined to be a drug addict. That I was just going to be a statistic. I was going to end up like my mother. I never felt seen or heard. I never felt seen or heard. And I want other people to feel seen and heard. I want people to have an opportunity at life. Today, my life is incredible. You know, my oldest is 22 years old, and I have a 15-year-old son and twin 11-year-old daughters, and they're the most amazing children. I have an amazing job now, but I cannot wait to get Stella's Casa up and running. You know, it's getting there. You know, but every dream starts with baby steps, and maybe this is a baby step for me. They just fighting my nerves, feeling like an idiot making this video, but feeling like I have to because I just want to help people. And not just the addict, but the family members, because I've been on both sides of the spectrum. You know, I know it's like to be around addicts that you love and care about, and, you know, that you try to save. You know, and while trying to save them, you break yourself. And I've been there. You know, I've been there. You know, I want to help break generational curses and, you know, generational habits. You know, I want to give the next generation an opportunity that maybe the last generation didn't have. I want to be able to help people get back on their feet. As a CRS, it means employment, trips to the hospital, doctors, work, housing assistance, food, clothing, and most importantly, just a safe place to come hang out. A place to bring your family and your kids, a place to heal as an individual and together. You know, and before I say anything more stupid, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm fighting a cold. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna end with that. I want to thank you for listening to my video. If you're interested in more information on Stella's Casa, the recovery haven, please leave a comment, and please subscribe for more interesting videos to come. Thank you.